Testing, testing. 1 and a 2 and a 3. Iron lung, people. Let's talk about it. Okay, so yes, this video has been posted earlier than scheduled. For those of you who are not aware, I post every 2 weeks on this channel, a schedule that works for me in most cases, so don't get too happy. This is a special occasion. As it happens, my schedule is kind of changing a little bit next week, and I don't want too much time to pass before I talk about this. Okay, so this past weekend, I checked out Iron Lung, a movie that I, like many others, have been waiting for the past 2 or 3 years. Why would I be waiting for a horror movie for so long? Well, actually, if you've been following me in any capacity, that's not really all that surprising. But this movie in particular I've been waiting so long for because of this man, Mark Fishbach, better known as Markiplier in these YouTube creator lands. Okay, so before you guys get all weird on me about this, let me explain. I like Markiplier. I was introduced to his content through my youngest daughter when she was a teenager. And I've always dug his stuff that he's put out there. He makes very good content, like I said. But that said, I want to make it very clear that I am not a Markiplier superfan. Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you're going to be a superfan of anybody, he is a great person to be a superfan of. But I say that because I want to let you know that this video is not going to be some great big let's blow Markiplier party. Even though I'm sure I could bank a whole lot of views if it were that, but that's not what this is about. It's kind of important to me that you guys know that going into this. You'll understand why as I go on. Okay, so I've seen a lot of his content, and I've also seen a lot of his stuff outside of his Let's Play stuff that he regularly puts out on YouTube. And I'm talking big projects like A Date with Markiplier or In Space with Markiplier, which by the way, of those two, I think there are 3 out there actually. Of the 3, personally, In Space with Markiplier is probably the best of all of his Choose Your Own Adventure YouTube content. I also did catch him in a couple of movies that he actually did. I know that there was a horror movie that he had a small part in back in the day. I cannot remember the name of it. At least I think he did. I honestly hope I'm not mixing him up with somebody else with that. But more notably, he was in Edge of Sleep. That is, I think, exclusively on Prime Video, if my memory serves me correctly. That, by the way, not great, but his performance in it is perfection. All that to say that I have seen him in enough acting things that make me want to watch him in a bigger project, such as Iron Lung. So yeah, when I heard that he was going to be like writing and directing and starring in his own horror movie, yeah, I was in from word go. And that's the case for most of us. And he announced it and we locked in, and then he edged us for the next 3 years. Eventually the trailer did come out and I was excited because it looked, well, bloody. But I mean, listen, if you're going to tell me that you're holding the Guinness World Record for the most amount of blood used in a film, generally speaking, honestly, that's all I need to show up. Okay, so before I get talking about the movie itself, you should know that I had not seen any of the Let's Plays related to this movie. That is to say, this movie was based off of a video game called Iron Lung that he did a few Let's Plays of. I did not see any of those prior to seeing this movie, so I walked into this knowing virtually nothing about the game or the storyline or the plot outside of the fact that Markiplier had played it and was responsible for making the movie. And truly that's how I wanted to go about this, against the advice of my youngest daughter, who has seen almost all of his content, including the Iron Lung playthroughs. And while, you know, after the fact, I do understand why she suggested I watch the playthroughs first. Honestly, I'm glad that I didn't. The thing is, if you watch the playthroughs, then you'll already be up on a lot of the lore of the film before, like, the first frame. And that's cool if you're looking for a fan experience. But I, on the other hand, was looking for a horror movie experience. Being that I'm a horror movie aficionado, I wanted to view this like it was any other horror film. And that's really important because for a project like this, it means something to understand it outside the niche that it was created in. Like Markiplier could do fan service all day, every day, as I imagine any YouTube creator could do in his position. But how cool would it be to make something from that niche that you work in that happens to reach a wider audience? So yeah, my goal in watching this, other than to be entertained, was to see that if this movie had actual horror movie chops. So, what did I think? Let's get into it. Oh, but before we do get into it, I want to give a shout out to Andrew Hulshut, who happens to be a Texas native. Now that's important because I live in Texas. So, of course, I saw this movie in Texas on opening weekend. What I did not realize is that Andrew Hulshut was going around to theaters in Texas to thank people for coming to watch the movie, which is freaking awesome. I know I've gone on about this. You have no idea who it is. Look, Google him. He's kind of a big deal. He's responsible for the soundtrack of not only this movie and the video game, but also such classics as Quake and Doom. Okay, so quick synopsis. Iron Lung tells a story about an event that happens in the future called the Quiet Rapture. Basically, all the stars in the sky go dark and communications with all of Earth's colonies on other planets are disconnected. It's a pretty bleak time in human history. It leads to the human race basically slowly dying out. Now, in this dystopia, there is a system where prisoners are given the opportunity to make amends for their crimes by performing acts of service for their society. Or at least that's the idea. So Mark plays a guy who happens to be one of those prisoners. Within the first few minutes of the movie, we see that he's sealed in a submarine called the Iron Lung. His mission: to explore an ocean of blood on one of the many moons in the galaxy. You heard me right, an ocean of blood. Why is there an ocean of blood on a moon? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. It just is. Go with it. And yeah, that the Guinness World Records thing that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that's where that comes from. They literally used 80,000 gallons of blood for this movie. There was so much blood in this movie, I swear I thought I got some on me as I was walking out. There was so much blood in this movie, I swear some got in my drink, on my popcorn, and a little bit on my clothes. So, okay, Mark's character, Simon, is a prisoner who's involved in the destruction of a very important space station where a whole bunch of people died. And the whole reason he's doing this job is because he's been promised his freedom should he complete this mission. So what's interesting about this part of the plot is that the mission sounds pretty easy on paper. You go down in the blood ocean in a submarine, you take some x-ray pictures, collect some samples, come back up, you get your freedom. Unfortunately, like most authoritarian regimes in dystopian settings, they are clearly lying to poor Simon. Now, what he finds out during the course of his journey is a number of things, all of them bad, the worst of which being that the powers that be have absolutely no intention of giving him his freedom. One of the ways he's clued into this bare bones fact is that the Iron Lung has the same amount of protection as the mini sub in Ocean Gate. Actually, it's a little more sturdy than that. I mean, it lasted longer anyway. Now, around the time he finds this out is shortly after the chain that's tethering him to the mothership breaks, and he goes crashing into said blood ocean, and his submarine gets all jacked up. So now he ends up traveling around in a broken ship in a blood ocean, and also he starts to go a little cuckoo. Oh, and there's something in the ocean stalking him. Something big and scary, and yeah. Needless to say, it is a bad situation for poor Simon the prisoner. Now, when we talk about the things that I liked and I didn't like about this movie, let's pro and con this, starting with the cons. Okay, so this entire movie takes place within the Iron Lung, where our hero has been trapped. Now, if you've ever seen any kind of movie that happens to take place completely in one location, then you probably had several different experiences ranging from good to terrible. I mean, I can tell you from a writer's point of view that writing a plot that of a story that takes place in one room is hard. It's really freaking hard. And the reason why it's so hard is because pacing becomes paramount. The act of keeping the story moving is a whole lot easier when you're traveling across vast New Zealand landscapes to return the One Ring, or through space to different piratey type planets. There's a lot to pull from that in that regard. And as quiet as it's kept, a lot of times writers can't even do that in stories where there's a million locations. And I mean that to say that in general, mastering pacing in a story, especially one like this one, is particularly difficult. And I did come across a lot of critics picking on the pacing of this film. And to that, I just have one thing to say. They're wrong. Wait. Hear me out. Okay, so a movie that has bad pacing usually has these moments where nothing happens, or whatever is happening is dragging out for far too long. It's the kind of stuff that can usually be fixed in an editing room, usually by an editor that's got a good eye for storytelling. This isn't the case for Iron Lung. If you're paying attention, every beat is actually accounted for. Quiet moments are quiet for a reason, and dialogue that goes on and on doesn't do so unless there's a purpose to the story as a whole. That said, I think that what most of the critics are referring to when they say that the pacing isn't very good, I don't think is actually the pacing at all. And not for nothing, this movie is a solid 2 hours, okay? And you feel every minute of it. That said, I think it's too easy to blame the pacing. I don't think that's what it is. In fact, I feel like it's coming from several different directions. For one thing, it's actually impossible to be able to differentiate how much time has passed in this setting. Like, the location is actually pretty freaking claustrophobic, and there are no windows, and you can't really tell what's outside, and you are in a blood ocean. There is this distinct kind of feeling that I can only equate it to, like, if you've ever had to sit and wait where there was no television, or you didn't have a phone or nothing to distract you from just having to sit and wait for an extended period of time. Yeah, it's like that. And it's not the fault of the pacing that's happening. It's got to do with the situation. The situation itself puts you in the space of, oh my God, when is this going to end? Okay. And honestly, I feel like that's intentional, which is interesting, because if there's one thing that I know about movie audiences, they don't like being uncomfortable, even when watching a horror movie. So if you do something in your movie that makes your audience uncomfortable, they're going to complain about it, and they're probably going to blame the pacing. The other thing is something that I'm not sure if it was an issue with the theater in which I saw the movie, but the sound was off on this film. I don't know if it was a mixing issue or if it was just something in the theater, but it was kind of hard to hear a lot of the conversations that were happening between Mark and the people coming through his little loudspeaker. Because of that, it kind of took a minute for me to catch on with what was going on with the plot. And that kind of leads me to the last thing, and the part where most people who know the game had a leg up, and that's understanding what was happening in the story. Now, actually, I think that was a problem for people who panned this movie, and I think that's because stories that involve things like eldritch horrors and anything scientific tend to fly over the heads of a lot of audiences, which is unfortunate. Now, I'm not saying that people don't get movies like that are stupid or anything like that. Far from it. It's just a simple case of not getting it. And the way that works is that most of the time, if you don't get it, then you tend to tap out at the door. And we've all had that experience of tapping out when we couldn't wrap our minds around the concept of a movie for one reason or another. When that happens, the story does tend to drag. Anyway, let's move on to the pros. Okay, so as a freshman attempt at writing, directing, and starring in your own indie film goes, this was a fantastic movie. And let me just tell you, this is coming from someone who's seen her share of bullshit when it comes to horror movies. indie horror movies in particular. Iron Lung is the definition of what a passion project is supposed to look like, because it's not just a passion for the story or for the video game. It's a passion for the genre and for filmmaking in general. I mean, God, so much attention was given to certain shots, types of lighting, and when to do types of lighting, a level of makeup and special effects. Like there was a sense of not settling for good enough here. And I am here for it. So, for example, my favorite part of the movie is something small, but it's actually pretty freaking brilliant from a filmmaking aspect. So there's a part in the movie where the power has gone out in the sub. Side note, the lighting in the dark parts of the movies, it wasn't freaking pitch black. And for that, Markiplier, I personally want to thank you. Man, I don't know why nobody has figured out in 2026 how to light dark scenes in horror movies, but I am so glad that he figured it out. So anyway, during the sequence, he uses the light from the ship's X-ray machine to light his way. Now, the light only lasts about 10 seconds. I know this because my autistic brain started counting that down almost immediately. Do y'all have any idea how hard it is to film a sequence on a visual timer like that? You got to take into consideration that while this is happening, he's not just sitting still while the light is going on and off. He's doing things in different parts of the vessel. And this wasn't a continuous shot either. He's fixing his wounds, he's checking the computer, he's going under the floor to find the emergency battery. This is all stuff that you have to do in several takes. And they managed to do it and keep the light keeping time the whole time. But as good as the little moments were in this movie, the big moments were just as great, you know. It really told me that Markiplier really knew where the money was supposed to go in the making of this movie. Special effects in indie horror films can vary considerably. Usually they tend to leave you, the audience, to have to suspend your imagination. A lot in some cases. There was none of that here. The makeup effects were top of the line, as were the big green screen moments. There wasn't really a second where I felt like I could see the strings at all. And again, for a movie that was made for a mere $3 million, I wasn't expecting good special effects. I certainly also wasn't expecting to have my mind blown. In any event, this movie and its creator deserve all the flowers in the world. And I hope it stays in theaters for a while. I hope it gets some awards at the big horror gigs. And I hope that people keep talking about it for a very, very long time. And more than all that, I really hope that there's a DVD coming out at some point, because I personally would kill to have this movie in my collection. And that's it for this week's video essay. Thank you so much for listening to me rant for a little bit. I normally post every 2 weeks, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you'll be the first to see my next post. With that said, see you next time. Bye.